Here's CNN. U.S. warned in 95 of plot to hijack planes, attack buildings. Actual news article. U.S. warned in 95 of plot to hijack planes and attack buildings. And this article goes into great detail about how the FBI in 95 had actually intercepted terrorists and knew of their plans to hijack aircraft and crash them in to lower Manhattan. Just establishing that the government doesn't need any more funding, doesn't need any more control over our lives. They knew all about this. But you see, they don't get more funding until more terrorist attacks take place. Here's one from the Los Angeles Times, December 5th, 2001. Clinton let bin Laden slip away and metastasize. Sudan offered up the terrorist and data on his network inside the United States. The then president and his advisors didn't respond. See, they're all members of the Council on Foreign Relations. They're all members of the Trilateral Commission. They're all members of the Bilderberg Group. Here it is. Clinton let bin Laden slip away and metastasize. Sudan offered to arrest him and tried to give him data on the network here in the U.S., and Clinton didn't want it. That was in 96 and then again in 98. How did Clinton respond to them? He bombed their aspirin factory, their medical factory that was supplying about a third of Africa with medicines. Now we're getting into the really hardcore evidence. And are you going to wake up out there, people? Or are you just going to be a face in the crowd that doesn't affect change, that doesn't have power? God created you to affect change, to be involved, to be a factor, to be in that arena, not to be a spectator. This is from the Times of London, one of the most highly respected newspapers in England. Wednesday, March 7th, 2001, before September 11th. See, we were already covering this on my radio show. We were saying bin Laden was about to attack and that Bush was funding him and that they were going to then declare martial law, which they've done. CIA worked in tandem with Pakistan to create the Taliban. And that was from March 7th, the Sunday Times of London. And it talks about the Central Intelligence Agency and the CIA worked with Pakistani intelligence, which they put into power, to fund Al-Qaeda and to fund the Taliban with hundreds of millions of dollars a year. $132 million in 2001 alone. And of course, the head of Pakistani intelligence, which is publicly has to be approved by U.S. funding to that country by the CIA, wired $100,000 to Muhammad Atta, the lead hijacker. All here in the Sunday Times of London. CIA worked in tandem with Pakistan to create the Taliban. And we hear about how the Taliban tortures people, how they kill people, how they deal drugs, which is all true, how they're evil, which is obviously true, how they're oppressive. And our government, the cabal that runs it, put them into power. Put them into power. So that later they could bring them down and the Afghan people would accept anybody over the Taliban, the worst regime in their history, worse than the Russians. And guess who that is now? The United Nations just publicly took it over, the biggest opium production area in the world, and they're out planting their fields. It's in the news. The UN's letting them plant their heroin. And, of course, it has the second biggest oil reserves in the world, and Dick Cheney, the vice president's company, Halliburton, just completed the pipeline 2 months before September 11th into Afghanistan. And now the UN and all these big private banks get all the natural resources. You see how the scam works. Set up a boogeyman, let him attack your country, bring the boogeyman down. Here's one. This is from the San Francisco Chronicle. Al-Qaeda terrorist worked with the FBI right through the 98 embassy bombings of U.S. embassies. And they never even arrested him. And they let him become a U.S. Army sergeant who then went to train Osama bin Laden's bodyguards. Oh, Al-Qaeda terrorist worked with the FBI. Read all the details at Infowars.com. Here's one from the Los Angeles Times. Watch list didn't get to the airline. Security, federal authorities were suspicious of 2 hijackers, but warning wasn't shared. You read deeper into the article, they'll put you in the watch list if you've been busted with a pound of marijuana before. These guys were known members of Al-Qaeda terrorist network, but the feds, it says, were ordered to keep their names out of the customs computers and the airline computers. So, watch list didn't get to the airline. Oh, but the warning wasn't shared. Though David Shippers, the impeachment lawyer, the guy that brought down the mob in Chicago, was beating on Ashcroft's door, begging him to stop the terrorists with 3 boxes of files, saying to him, they're about to attack any time. We've got to stop them. We've got to stop them now. Why are you threatening these good FBI agents? Why are you threatening defense intelligence officers from the Department of Defense if they stop these terrorists? And Ashcroft, who he knows personally, wouldn't meet with David Shippers. Washington Times, maybe you'll trust this trusted news source. Justice blocked FBI warrant on 2 of the other hijackers up there in Minnesota flight school. Look at that. Washington Times, Justice blocked FBI warrant. Wouldn't let them stop the terrorists. Well, no kidding. The government got triple the funding for anti-terrorism in 1995 after the Oklahoma City bombing with the 1996 Anti-Terrorism Effective Death Penalty Act, which does nothing to stop terrorists and everything to take your rights away. And the legislation is coming up. And these are the FBI agents David Shippers was representing before the attack, who were threatened with jail if they stopped the CIA-funded and controlled Al-Qaeda terrorists. Here's another one. Judicial Watch, the guys that went after Clinton, highly respected conservatives. The government is lying about the full extent and the source of the anthrax attacks. Judicial Watch. And they quote, this is from October 24th, the September 28th and 29th Wall Street Journal, that Bush gets millions of dollars a year from the bin Laden family, from the Carlyle Group, the big defense contractor. And then Bush is actually on the bin Laden family payroll, both Bushes. And that George Bush, this was in the October 24th Associated Press, was on Cipro, the anthrax-fighting antibiotic, the day of September 11th, 3.5 weeks before anthrax even showed up. And now they're having to admit, it's been in Reuters, that it's a U.S. government strain, U.S. weapons grade, and it looks like somebody inside the U.S. government released it. That came out in Reuters. Somebody in the U.S. envoy to the UN blew the whistle incognito and released more secret documents that have now been released that are on Infowars.com. Just absolutely amazing. This is from the Fox website. This is a brief synopsis of what the show was about. 3 months before the September 11th attacks. Talk about mass conditioning you. In the show, a secret government group puts a computer on board the aircraft so that they hack into it and they try to fly a jumbo jet into the World Trade Center towers, which is exactly what the government knew the Islamics were planning in Al-Qaeda back in 1995. But with actual hijackers, and we just read that article. So throwing it in your face 3 months before September 11th, Fox Television with the lone gunman. And that was Lone Gunman Pilot 1A EB79 pilot program, where the government is going to hijack a plane with a computer to fly it full of passengers into the World Trade Center tower to get martial law. God. And now I talk about it. Ooh, you heard that on the X-Files. See how they do that preconditioning? Very sophisticated. A few weeks later, it comes out in the Pensacola News Journal, highly respected publication. Senator seeks answers on hijackers' ties to Navy base. And in the article, it admits that they were trained at the base right before the terrorist attacks. There you have it. Pensacola News Journal. I mean, this is massive. This is from the Sunday Mail, the third largest mainstream newspaper in England. Bin Laden family linked to Bush in Arbusto Oil, Harkin Energy, Carlyle Group, right up into 2001. Vacationing with the Bin Laden family. Boy, they had this set up a long time ago. Oh, but I guess the former CIA director, George Bush, the blue blood from Kennebunkport, Maine, I guess he wouldn't think anything up like this, would he? This was first reported in Le Figaro, one of the big newspapers over in France, and reported by National French Radio and Television, then picked up by the BBC. Le Figaro reported that CIA agents met with Osama bin Laden in a Gulf hospital as early as last July, from July 4th to July 14th, and gave them precise information about imminent attacks on the United States. Bin Laden was being nursed back to health at the U.S. military hospital in Pakistan.